custom modules, you're going to have to do a little bit of work to, yes, awesome. Halfway through the stream, we're actually now able to hear my redneck voice modules. You're going to have to do a little bit of work to, yes, awesome. Halfway through the stream, we're actually now able to hear my redneck voice modules. You're going to have to do a little bit of work to, yes. Now it's playing my voice on here. It's playing me talking like 3 seconds ago. Okay. Why is this so hard? I just write code, man. I don't know. Okay, sound's working on the stream. Yay. Okay. The majority of your work in these is just going to be adding type declarations. They're very, very strict now. In Craft 4, there's not a YE update in there, but they've kind of let that go a lot on the Craft side of things. So Andrew has a really cool PHP Storm tip. I don't use PHP Storm. I probably should. I'm still VS Code, but you can apply inspections to the entire file and tell it to fix all problems in the file, and it'll go through and add all the type checking and declarations that it needs. Aaron also said it does not fix your bad programming. So it's not super magic. I thought that was an awesome reply there. To make this a little easier, they released a very oddly named package called Rector, which funny enough is also a plugin to fix plugins. So total inception, and it can go through and handle most of the work of adding your type checking and type declarations to your classes within your plugins and modules. So to do this, make sure that you're running 3.7.35 or later. Do not be on Craft 4 yet. So run these in your Craft 3 code base. Set your composer config to the minimum stability dev, which should already be in place if you're running modules or custom plugins that you're keeping local. Prefer stable true. And then you want to require this new package as a dev dependency, Craft CMS Rector, and then you run this script vendor bin rector process src config, and you call the actual plugin. So like this is an example of calling up their set. If you needed to run this on a module, you would just change the path of your src argument here to wherever that module's main init file is. I'm going to use this pretty heavily over the next couple of weeks because I've got a lot of custom modules and a lot of custom plugins that need to be converted. So we'll see how this works. After you run this, your code should have type declarations added that are compatible with Craft 4. It's normal if it breaks because remember you ran this on Craft 3, so this should be really your first step if you're going to be converting this over. And then, after this, you want to convert your Craft CMS dependency to the 4.0 alpha and run your composer update, and then you start the whole process of moving up to 4. So again, we did not really expand on a bunch of stuff within plugins because this could be an hour-long talk in itself. Maybe we'll do that in the summer, but I'm just going to list a couple of the cool things that is available now for plugins and modules. So if you've ever had to do like your own HTML screen or something for settings or anything like that, it's kind of painful. You got to include and extend like front end packages and all that stuff. It's really messy. Now you can do that with a controller, which is really cool, and just call the class at the top as a slot out, which apparently was almost impossible with Craft 3 with a custom plugin from what I hear from SoulSpace developers. It's easy to do full pages and also slot outs now, so you can get really custom with anything that you need your content editors to be able to interface with your plugins. They have a unified element editor, which is pretty cool. Zero editing experience, no boilerplate code needed. It's just included for free. You can register your own custom image transformers, which I've tried to do and is very, very difficult. So I'd stick to ImageMagick or, GD if you need to fall back to that. Or if neither one of those work for like WebP, there's the Google WebP package you can use for that. But if you need to, it's totally possible now. You probably really should be using a third-party mailer service because we all know sending email through PHP is not reliable at all. But apparently Symfony Mailer is way better than Swift Mailer, even though it probably still kind of sucks. But if you need to use it, at least for initial development and testing things like that, that package is now available for use out of the box. You really should be using like SendGrid or something like that, or Mailgun. And they're really pushing plugin developers to really get your PSR standards up to speed. And logging is much better with this package called Monolog, which makes it really human readable and a lot more transversable. So that's available now as well. Some resources to help your efforts in plugin and module conversions. So Ryan has a super detailed, like 14 chapter long course where he actually goes through and converts a Craft 3 plugin to Craft 4. It's pretty awesome. Andrew, who's the biggest wizard you could ever imagine, actually has a dual Craft 3 and 4 plugin development set up locally. They did a whole live stream about it where he can actually have his 3 working and go method by method and class by class and actually, be able to test stuff on the fly instead of switching back over here. Does it work? Nope, it doesn't work. Okay, I got to switch back over here. Nope, I got to switch back. That can get kind of painful for really extensive plugins, which of course with Andrew, that's what he does for a living. So, he's got to make sure his stuff's up to chops. Crap. All right, the other link I've got at the end, it was just the main Craft docs, which is pretty extensive about plugin changes. So commercial plugins, we all love them and know them and use them extensively, especially me. Since maybe a month and a half ago, all of the plugins have a compatibility area in the sidebar now where it'll tell you if it's Craft 3 and Craft 4 or if it's still just Craft 3. If you use it and it still says Craft 3, I would definitely go look at their repo and see if somebody has filed an issue. And a lot of them are saying, I'm getting to it. I'll get it done by May 4th. A lot of people are saying that. And actually, I looked the other day and there were quite a few that had actually updated in the last week. So you can quickly see which ones are available for PHP or compatible with PHP 8. Just change your platform requirement to 8. I've been running 8 locally for a couple months now. Probably most people are too. And then just do, when you get in there, do a composer update dry run so that you're not actually updating anything. It will tell you I worked, or it's going to tell you, nope, didn't work. Once everything's upgraded, just run it without dry run and actually run it exactly right, and you'll be good. All right, so here's some more neat stuff, and I touched on this earlier. When you saw that .collect method, that is a new concept in Craft, but not a new concept in Laravel. If you've done any Laravel work, this has been pretty common for about 2 years with them, and it's trying to ensure that when you're calling stuff, you're going to get an array. You're always going to get an array because we all know arrays are much easier to iterate over, filter down, all of that than an array of objects or an object with an array in it or just whatever mess we can do with. So the cool thing and the place that this is going to come into impact the most is eager loading. And if you're familiar with doing eager loading to try to really enhance the parse experience and reduce how many queries Craft is doing, because we all know that can get compounded enormously. You don't have to update your code to iterate over an array if it's not eager loaded. So it kind of dries out your code a little bit. So you would call it just like .all or .1, And really, you probably should just not use .all anymore and just use .collect, because it's just going to give you a cool, nice formatted array. When it comes into filters, it's maybe a few lines of code less or a few words less. It's basically the same thing. So like here, I've hit an array, I've got the collection here, and then as I call it, I'm running a group filter on it. It's essentially the same thing with the Laravel collection. Again, if you're familiar and have used Laravel, their documentation is stupendous. So their whole section about collections is super easy to read and understand. All of that is available to you now. So there's some very useful and some very cool utilities in there that can help speed up your more complex query work here. So eager loading, notice the quotation marks. This is directly from Ryan Ireland's blog post about this. So thank you, Ryan, if you're out there, for putting in the work on this. But the first place you want to apply collection support is anywhere you're using eager loading. It's going to be one block of code that you can use for eager loading and lazy loaded elements, and no code duplication. All eager loaded elements are returned as collection arrays by default now. So you don't have to do anything special. If you're eager loading something, it's going to give you that specific array already. You can use the collect method on top of that for your element queries, and that returns that query's results as a Laravel collection along with an array of your eager loaded elements. So layman's terms, no more calling the actual key object on an asset, no longer having to have two different loops where you're calling .1 where it's not eager loaded and entry asset 0 for the ones that are. And where that comes into play is if you're lazy loading stuff. So if you're lazy loading, Twig's already parsed everything it's going to do. So you've got like two different ways that you're pulling assets in, kind of gross. No longer the case now. You don't have to do that at all, since you're getting your eager loaded elements as collections and standard data arrays. You can just literally use the same thing. So like here is an example. Painful, you got to do teaser image 1, but later on, if you're using it, or if it's a slideshow that you're lazy loading in the rest of the slides, now I've got to call 1 on those because I've got to make another query to go out and get that asset. Now, all you got to do is just do .collect, .first, .url. It's going to work for eager loaded and non-eager loaded, which is awesome. And I've actually a couple times late at night working on a view, God, I really don't want to do this eager loading shit. So I just like leave it. I'll come back to it later. And then later on, they're like, hey man, my core web vitals are like really down right now. And I'm like, oh shit, I forgot to eager load this. Probably doing like 5,000 queries as it loads that page. So it'll impact load times for sure. I don't do this very often because I'm not really in control of a lot of client content, but I do have clients that have pretty image intensive websites, like building companies and like interior design companies and stuff like that. And they are actually using the image editor's focal point to try to, focus things, because they're doing like on the front end, like Zoom load ins and things like that. So now you don't have to actually go to the asset and change the focal point, which has been a little bit painful from what I've heard from some editors. If you're including that in an entry, like, in an image field or an asset field, you actually can change that focal point right then as it pops up in the little window, which is cool. This is pretty neat too. You can restrict asset fields to one single location, including subfolders. So if you're pretty deep on organization of your assets, which I really encourage all of my clients to do so, that can get kind of painful because you can only pick one volume set, and they get in there and they're like, oh, well, this image doesn't look right. Well, you're on the homepage and you picked a blog image, because we've got one big bucket of images. So now you can really get as deep as you need to within your subfolder organization, and also carry that over to the content editing experience. Users can now manage addresses. which can be referenced by plugins such as Craft Commerce. This is pretty big. Jeff and I have been working on a pretty heavily address use project, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And we're using Lindsay's Google Maps plugin because we need the client to be able to put a bunch of validated addresses in. And we use those very, very heavily for mapping and all kinds of filtering and stuff. And I love Lindsay to death. But man, getting in there, that plugin's intense. And if you're doing anything on the actual plugin side and calling the classes, they're even more intense. So I don't know what the future of Google Maps plugin will be here, but this seems like it's, taking over and doing the Apple thing where it's totally eating the plugin and pulling it in. So hopefully Lindsay's getting some good money from Pixel Tonic on that. Hint to the world. This is big for commerce. So, how in commerce, you got to have a user. It's got to have an email address to have anybody buy anything, unless even for a guest, you have to have something that you can attribute that order to. And those were always different from a craft user. So I've only got one site that actually does ordering on top of having front end users that are actually able to edit stuff. It's a website. Actually, they think they just fired the agency that I was working for. So it's visualaids.com in New York City is HIV positive artist management site where they have tons and tons of artists and they go in and manage their whole portfolio in there, but they also can allow people to buy it and they can pay other artists for stuff like that. So they're actually using commerce users on top of craft users. And there's right now no connection between those. So say, for example, you enter your email address wrong on one and the other one, you've got two different users. They're totally ambiguous from each other. It's messy. So now they have this concept called inactive users. And you can actually have a craft user that can be used in commerce as well. And nobody has to know about it. They don't have login credentials. They can represent a person or an entity like a company or something like that. Sounds kind of wacky, but the thing that I saw that I thought was the neatest is that as you're building a site, you can go ahead and make users that can be handed off to the client, and you're not the author of blogs anymore, which is always fun to launch the site. And they're like, wait, my user isn't the author of this blog. And I've got this thing up on the website that says Justin wrote all these blogs. I didn't write any of those blogs. So you can create their users, assign them to content and things like that. And then later on, open them up to the actual user, like give them their activation link or email or whatever it is. Pretty neat. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the commerce side of things, but locale support in the past, if you didn't have that language and the content editor needed to have their control panel use that language, they weren't able to do that because you didn't actually have that as a site. Now they can change their language to whatever it is that Craft supports, and it's pretty deep. It's got they've added a lot of support for all kinds of more obscure languages now, so that's really helpful. I do have a client that is how can I describe them? It's the organization that represents the guru that invented yoga. So his name is like something Parashna, and he's long since gone, but they have 24 languages, I think. And they actually have content editors for each of those languages in lots of countries that go and convert that content over. And that's been kind of painful to them because they, as we add new languages, some of them have not been supported in the control panel. So they're in there trying to convert, they still can convert English over pretty well, but they're using UI stuff that's still in English or whatever. This will help with that a lot. Performance, always super important. We want our sites to run faster. We want our CMS editors to be able to publish their changes faster. If you've got multi-site installs and a lot of complex content models with matrix and neo and matrices that have super tables, that have tables, that have matrices, I'm completely guilty of that. It's part of the nature of the beast when it comes to content management. You know very quickly when that gets deep because you'll save a draft and it literally takes it like 20 seconds to save. And I've got a client right now that it's gotten bigger and bigger, and they're like, dude, it's taking so long to save these things. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, you've got 7 languages, you've got a matrix that is 50 fields deep. It takes a while for it to write all that stuff to the database. So that's supposed to get substantially faster, especially for these complex situations like I just described, which are painful. And it's always fun to tell the client, I'm sorry, but your list of entries cannot be filtered by this certain field. And they're like, why not? And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. So they have expanded the options that you have in an entries list, and you're pretty much able to filter by just about any field in there. Probably still not going to work for like freeform fields or, very specific to plugins, but that should get better. I've actually had to use the do you remember the name of that plugin that you can use, the CP filters? Yep. So I've had to use CP filters a lot lately to give them that extra ability to filter by some obscure field that the control panel list doesn't do, which is still pretty cool because you can export that out pretty easily. But conditional fields. So rest in peace to conditional fields plugin, which has been dead for a long time, and also long live the reasons plugin, which will also be probably going away with Craft 4. But Jeff is a huge user of this and every other UI element within the content editor builder. I think it really adds to the editing experience and helps guide the user in the right direction. It also gives us more of a safety net. What's that cool button? I'm going to click that and select something. Who the hell knows what that's going to do on the front end? Why did you do that? Don't do that. Content editors, what are you doing? So now that's out of the box. It can be visible, editable, certain conditions. You can even filter it down to logged in certain types of user groups, which is pretty cool. Relation conditions, relational fields like entries and assets and users. And I kind of touched on this talking about assets earlier. Now they have settings which can further limit which elements can be relatable beyond the source setting, which has been a little bit painful in the past. So say, for example, you've got a category set and you've got nested categories, and you only want the user to be able to select second level or third level categories in there. Totally impossible now. When they click on it, they get the full tree. If you click a child, you're going to get everything else in there. Now you can specify, you can only select a child category or something like that, which is pretty neat. How that impacts the front end, I'm not clear yet, but this is pretty big too. So I've inherited quite a few sites that were not really planned out the best and have used categories basically as entries. And I've got one that almost builds many websites on one category. Support's out there, and it's, nobody really told them not to do that, but that gets kind of painful because in Craft 3 and 2, there's no drafts, there's no revisions. If you delete it, you're fucked because there's no way to recover it. And I've actually had that happen a couple of times recently with a client that's like, hey, somebody changed one of the fields that is not translatable in a category and it filtered to all the other sites. And I'm like, that's why you don't change fields that are not translatable if it's not your site, Plus with a category, there's no way to recover that. So for a long time, in the marketing part of Craft 4 is coming, they were saying categories are going away and tags are going away. And that kind of scared people a little bit. They didn't really go away. They're still there. They're still called categories, but they now use all the entry modeling and stuff. So now you've got drafts. You can have multiple authors. You've got versioning support. You've got publishing time, expiration dates, all of that stuff is now part of categories. So I still would not encourage you to build many websites based on your categories. Categories have they should be used for relations, but again, should be getting better on that. And here's a blog post where they kind of go into more of the marketing side of Craft 4, and that's where a lot of this has come from. So are we doing on time? 7:40. All right, I'll speed up a little bit. So, excuse me, Commerce 4. I did not really go into deep with this because, again, this could be a talk on its own. We've touched on this earlier. Commerce no longer has its own concepts of customers and addresses. It's going to be paired with a craft user. So if somebody is a guest and they purchase something on your website, they're going to have an inactive craft user. And that might sound a little scary, but if you've ever had to use, like I explained with visual aids, it gets very painful trying to, are you a craft user or are you a commerce user? Oh, you're both, but your email difference is different. Oh man, I don't know what to do. So with inactive user and having the user address tied to those users, Commerce just piggybacks on that now. So you're able to use that address within shipping or billing. They have condition builders for discounts and shipping zones and tax zones. You can more flexibly match them based on user or address or order. They've gotten a little better in Commerce 3, but it's still, especially the shipping zones are a little painful. This kind of makes it more bespoke. Bulk coupon code generation. Luckily, I don't ever have to do this, but I've had clients complain that they have to one by one enter coupon codes. Now you could set up unique codes. For example, if you're sending out like a Black Friday email, a one-time use code for one email, you could do that in bulk now and invalidate them when they get used individually. They can increment themselves, yada yada. Full names, which is cool. I really hate having to have first name and last name. I even had somebody, I'm working on a commerce thing right now, and they're like, can you put full name in? And I'm like, no. They're like, why won't you do that? And I'm like, it's not me that decided that. It's commerce. They have to have first name and last name. So you can still use them for sorting purposes, but they parse them automatically now from the full name field. Debug toolbar now has a commerce panel. It puts info about the objects that were updated and whatever request you're doing, whether it's moving from a cart to an order or changing, I don't know what else would happen, order status or something like that. It gets pretty deep. So here's the link to the Commerce 4.x upgrading side of things. Honestly, reading it might be more work than Craft 4 is, which is pretty funny because it was complete opposite in the past. It was like, okay, just move to Craft or Commerce 3, you're good. Cool. Now it's like, okay, you really do have to change some stuff in here. Dun dun dun. Tears. What did not make the release cut? So at .all, not last year, but the year before last, Brandon got up on stage and was like, dude, Craft 4 is going to be so awesome. Here's this list of stuff that's going to be in it. And everybody was like, hooray. And if you've been in Discord lately, people were like, wait, I don't see this or that in the beta. I don't see this and that. So these are the things that did not actually make the cut for this 4.0.x release. Bulk element editing, different UI modes in a matrix instead of just table or list or another matrix. The matrix and matrix. God, we really should not be doing this. Octum's razor, but that's not there yet. A job scheduler, which is pretty cool, which you could do like, cron jobs from a dashboard, kind of like Laravel Forge does or something like that. Multi-author entries, site-specific email settings, which is a little bit painful. I'm working right now on converting some sites on DigitalOcean to use Mailgun and different accounts for different environments, and it's been a little bit painful, so that would help. Multi-factor authentication. We have a SoulSpace client right now that's holding off because part of their security ops is logins have to be multi-factor, and that's not supported currently. But they do have a roadmap, which is pretty cool. You can go to the website and see it. They actually say what upper version is going to be coming that's going to roll out these things, and the what's in progress has gotten taller and taller, which is promising because that means that they're actually working on it for like 4.1 or 4.2 release. All right, so we're getting towards the end. What can you do now? I would say if your site's pretty stable and your client's going to pay for it, or if Jennifer's going to let you bill the time, right, Lucas? Yeah. Go ahead and start working on this on your own locally on a branch. Would highly recommend setting up possibly a clone of your site so that you can run it on a different database instance. But get on the latest 3.7 release. Even if you're not planning to move to 4 anytime soon, try to get it up to 3.7 at least, because that's going to get harder and harder to support new plugins, bug fixes, and things like that. They're not going to be fixing stuff from like 3.6. So get your code base as stable as possible, address those damn deprecations, make sure your dependencies are up to date for PHP, MySQL, et cetera, all your server stuff, local operations. And like I said, do a new branch or possibly even a clone of the site, because you probably aren't going to be pushing this up anytime soon, although May 4th is pretty close, so maybe you will be. Clone the DB, change your environment settings, make sure that you're not going to inadvertently break production if you merge this into your main branch. And they have a nice step-by-step guide to performing the update. It's not really that painful. You change a couple composer dependencies, you run a couple of those obscure craft methods to do like database collation and some changes within there. I saw a video. The migration does take about 4 minutes to run because it's really doing a lot of stuff, and it did not error out, which is pretty cool. And start testing. Again, they have testers on payroll. It would really help the whole community if you're also able to test, and they don't have anything different. There's not a Craft 4 channel in Discord. There's not a separate repo. They just want you to tag it as Craft 4 beta. If you go in the repo, it's very vibrant right now would be the best description. Brandon is on top of just about everything. Luke is on top of everything for commerce. I haven't seen any reply that took more than like 45 minutes to an hour for them to get back and validate it and say, okay, we can fix that quickly, or this might be 4.1 coming out. It's really refreshing to see an organization really encouraging early adoption of the breaking platform change. And of course, if you're not on Discord, the jokes are great in there. So I would highly encourage being in there as much as possible. I learn a lot. I save a lot of time not banging my head against the wall trying to figure something out on my own. I'll quickly be humbled. Just recently was really depending on commerce order status changes to dynamically do some stuff for a pretty complex project I'm working on. Built the whole system, pushed it up to staging. Shit was going crazy. And I was like, why is it changing to this other status? Because I literally said, use this status ID. And then I got in Discord and I was like, somebody has had to have faced this before. And so I got in there and was like, am I dumb? Or like, am I doing this wrong? And they're like, yes, that auto increments itself. Never depend on the ID of the order status. There's a commerce function that you can call on the front end or in a plugin, pass the handle of the status that you're trying to use, and it's going to return the ID, and then you can use commerce's methods to dynamically change that ID. And I was like, that literally would have taken me like 2 days to figure it out on my own. So thank you to the community. That's one of the things that I love the most about Craft is that it a lot of times feels like a family and people are really there to help each other. So again, wrap up. May 4th, it's going to be here before you know it. Stable beta is available now. Get ready as soon as you can. Commerce 4 released the same date. Major releases every single year should be pretty on the time, about the same time in this late spring, early summer. Most of the major and popular commercial plugins are Craft 4 ready. Bit.ly link for the enormously long YouTube channel URL. I will try to fix the audio. If not, I'll just re-record my talking over the top of it. And I'll put the slide deck up on the meetup group and also on the YouTube channel after this. Here's a whole bunch of links. I don't expect you to write any of these down right now, but I will get these up. And I just touched on all of these during the talk, but knowledge base is a lot better these days than it used to be. Again, thank you, Matt, for putting in a lot of work on making it readable and searchable. Changelog can be kind of painful to read sometimes, but I think this one is pretty helpful because it really lists a lot of the deeper new commerce functions that are available. They have blog posts, like I mentioned, that have good marketing material that you could use to convince your client to pay for another upgrade. What do you mean the website's upgrading again? We just paid you to do 3. I literally heard that last week, and I was like, bro, it's your biggest lead generation source. How much? What did I tell you, Jeff, at lunch? How much do you spend on coffee for the office a month? It's more than what yeah. So you need to keep your website up to date. Again, Laravel docs are awesome. You can read all about collections. Dev Mode FM is where Andrew and Ryan record their banter between the two of them, which could get pretty funny sometimes. But their stand-ups are really good, especially the one about Rector. Converting your typing within your plugins. CraftQuest, again, I've pumped them up a lot. It's really worth the money. I think it's $100 per user a year, and you'll learn a lot, especially on the commerce side. If you're really, getting your feet wet in there, it's extremely helpful. And I had to reference the Blue Egg because I grabbed a couple of their screenshots, but they had a nice blog post where they kind of talked about the collections and things like that. So. Next meetup will be next month at Union, and we're going to dive into smart and effective image management solutions. So we all know that your images are always going to be the heaviest weight on your website, especially if you're doing brochureware websites like Ray Ward does. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. It gets really challenging, and it compounds when we allow clients to just put whatever up there. I try to restrict upload limits, file size. It never fails that somebody's going to try to put up a 30 freaking megabyte image and then, hey, why did the server crash? Well, you uploaded a 30 megabyte image and there's 40 image transforms that happen, and we're doing them all on the server, and yeah, your server crashed. So we'll talk about ways to get around that with like services like ImageX, where you can offload transforms to their service and let your web server serve your website and not manage your images. Core Web Vitals is extremely important these days, and we'll talk about things that will affect that, like first contentful paint and things like that, and effective ways to store and manage and render all of your images with transforms and plugins that can help optimize when you upload, and responsive images, which you should be already using. Tuesday, May 24th, down at Union, right down the street. Not nearly as nice as here. I love Banks to death, but it's not as nice of an office. It's still really nice. It's still really nice. Don't get me wrong. Okay, questions and answers. Any questions? Yeah, you can just talk into that. It's recording too.
This is the sound of my voice.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Cool.
First, thank you so much for that extremely thorough overview.
You're welcome.
Changing in Craft 4, I had looked over the list a little bit, but that was way more in depth than I had read about so far. I assume that you've done migrations from Craft 2 to 3.
Oh, yes. Many of them. I've actually got a webinar about that online.
And then upgrading from 3 to 4 beta. Obviously, it's going to be different site to site.
Yep.
What's your feeling about the lift?
I think the real lift there is going to be how deep you go on custom plugins and custom modules. There's not a whole lot of difference in the two. I think the typing thing is something that's pretty easily solved. Moving from Ye 2 to Ye 3 was pretty painful. You experienced that when we were here and having to convert stuff, especially things that are ingesting APIs. I don't think that's going to be as painful now. If I was to approach the 60 or so odd sites that I have a list of that I have to convert, I'm doing the brochure aware ones first. The ones that are slimmed down, maybe image heavy and front end heavy, but are using fairly standard, plugins. I know those are going to be safe. They're going to have an easy migration. Most of those I've already done most of my twig deprecations and changed and tried to move away from things like site URL and the config things like that. So like you said, it's going to be site to site. That's the two things I would judge. I would look at utilities, deprecations, and see how deep that list is, how much work you're going to need to do on the front end, and then look at how extensive your custom modules and your custom plugins are be. I've got some really gnarly ones that I'm really afraid to start working on, especially one that I worked on with some of the Soul Space guys that interfaces with Pardot's API and Freeform, and it's going to be painful. I would probably hold off on those for a little bit, just to kind of see, especially in Discord and GitHub issues, what type of main craft stuff is interfering. I think you're pretty safe to do what I would call stable websites, which might use like Freeform and SEOmatic and a couple other plugins. You probably can convert those in 2 hours and have them safe to go up to production. Other stuff, it's going to be some work. It's not going to be as painful, I think, as 2 to 3. Like I said, Pixel Tonic is really, they knew that was shitty, and they couldn't help it. I mean, Ye 2 was deprecated, so they had no choice but to move up to that. They've really worked hard to make this less of a painful transition, knowing that it's not so painful for us, it's painful for the client to pay again to upgrade their website that they're already paying you to maintain. So they want to make this one and the next one and the next one in 2023 and 2024 be maybe an afternoon of work for a handful of sites, not like a 3-month project. Yeah, good question. Thank you, John. Anybody else? Bueller? Lucas, what do you think? I want to know your thoughts. Yep. Oh, trust me, I've got several sites that are still on Craft 2 and will probably stay on Craft 2 for a while because, I don't work for free. So if you're not going to pay for it, and if you don't touch it that often, sure, it's fine. It's best practice to keep it up to date. But I just saw like an 84 Corolla driving down the road the other day. It was still driving. It wasn't a brand new Porsche, but it was like, shit, it still drives somebody from work to home and back, So like, if your Craft 2 website works and you're not looking to move anything on it anytime soon, leave it on Craft 2, but that's going to get harder and harder and harder as the years go by. It's already, I would not want to move a Craft 2 site to 3 right now. I'm going to have to probably eventually, but yeah, it's not going to be an easy jump by any means. So yeah, try to encourage your clients to keep it up to date. I work with a group out of Chicago called Span Studios. I was just talking to Jeff about at lunch. Part of their thing is that if you come to them to build a website, you also have to sign a maintenance contract. and it has to be monthly, or they're not going to build the website, because their whole ethos is, we don't build something and go away. We might not do the development on your website in the future, but you're going to have to keep it up to date, because it's our name on the bottom of the website that built it. And if something fucks up on it, somebody's going to look at that and say, Span built a shitty website, and that's not how they operate. So I have probably 14 or so websites that we don't even really do that much feature work on at all. But monthly or quarterly, I go in and keep craft up to date, plugins up to date, hit the server. They're all on Laravel Forge, so it's really easy to update PHP versions or Ubuntu or whatever the stable packages are. And I mean, honestly, it makes it so much easier, because I mean, it's maybe 45 minutes of work for each site quarterly, because you're not jumping from like 3.1 to 3.7. You know, those can still be painful. You're moving from like 3.7.4 to 3.711, you know, and those migrations take like 15 seconds to run. And it's easier to fix breaking changes that could break stuff when there's one or two of them instead of a gigantic pile of them. So again, the client's got to agree and pay for that stuff. We could do it on our personal sites all the time. Full disclosure, my personal site does not run craft. It is so out of date. My beard is like this little skinny dude, and it's just not me. So I'm the worst. What is the old saying? The shoe cobbler's kids are always barefoot. So, but yeah, it's easy to do on your own. It's a little more difficult to get a client that's not fully invested in their platform to agree to the additional cost on top of their maintenance. It's challenging. Our jobs are challenging to manage people as well as websites, but you know, that's part of our jobs. We speak the language, right? They don't know. How many WordPress sites have you gotten into that are 5-6 years old? I'll even tell you a story from somebody here in Charlotte, an old neighbor of mine, an unnamed architecture firm, built their website in WordPress before I knew craft. It was a great website, and I was like, we need to do a maintenance contract because WordPress gets updated. Oh no, we've got a guy on staff. He knows WordPress. He can do it. Never heard from them. It's probably been 7 years. It was right around Christmas time. I got this panicked email from the guy. Oh my God, GoDaddy updated our WordPress version. The site is gone. And I was like, dude, I can't help you. Like, I haven't done WordPress in years. And that's a gigantic jump. Like, the platform's completely different now. Everything's different in there. You need to ask GoDaddy if they've got a backup. Luckily, they did, because he was like, what's it going to cost to fix it? And I was like, you're going to have to rebuild it in craft, because I don't do your WordPress site anymore. So, you know, it's a hard lesson to learn from some clients. I mean, they build websites to generate leads, most of them, and they got to invest the money to make sure it's staying stable to get them more leads. Thanks, Lucas. All right, if that's it, thank you. I hope to see all of you in May and June and July and August. Probably not September, because if you didn't hear earlier, they announced that .all is at the end of September, and it's in Brooklyn. So we don't have to spend thousands of dollars to fly to Amsterdam, which sounded cool last year. I tried to convince my wife. I was like, I got the passport, just let me pay for it. And she's like, nope. Sorry, buddy, you're not doing that. So I'll be up there. Hope some of you guys can come too. And we'll continue on through the end of the year. We'll be rotating, like I said, between here, Mode, Union, and hopefully Crafted. They're doing a lot of remodel at their office right now. So cool. Thank you. All right. Cool. We made